Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the My Career Path podcast. So today I'll actually be joined by another very special guest, Tim Cormier. He was actually a previous coworker of my dad's, and that's how we kind of made introductions. And it was just amazing to talk to him about the opportunities that are out there, following your passion, and just being an overall optimistic force in your company's culture. Just awesome to talk with him about learning and development, how he got into that field, and what keeps him around. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'm really excited to have you on the show. We haven't met too much, but you actually worked pretty closely with my dad when I was growing up in Boise. Probably haven't seen each other in about 20 or so odd years because I was just a kid then. So kind of introduce yourself to everybody, and what would you say are kind of the biggest achievements for you in your life?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colton. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate just this opportunity to talk to you, talk to everybody on your podcast, and again, just further collaborate with you and your family. Your father, I can't say enough amazing things about him. He's just amazing. So sure, some things that are some accomplishments that I've had. You know, you have your personal and you have your professional accomplishments. Right up front, my kids are personally my most amazing accomplishment that I've had. I can't say it enough. I've got two daughters and I'm just completely blessed. They are 17 and 19 years old and they're just incredible. And so everything I do is really to make sure that I'm doing something to be a very good father, to be a good husband, and to be a good role model for them. I mean, that really is everything I do is for them. So personally, I can't say that enough. Professionally, I've been so fortunate. I've had amazing opportunities to work with some amazing leaders, some amazing organizations, and just have some amazing opportunities to learn and develop. So right now, it's funny because it's always your halo effect. What are some things that are most recent with you? And so in the last couple of years, I've been certified in design thinking. It comes from Stanford University, and that's life-changing. I can't say that enough, how you just literally look at things differently. And so many times you just look at yourself and say, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe that's what I've done. And so I've been certified with design thinking, and then I have an advanced design thinking from Stanford, and it's awesome. And what it starts with is having empathy. And so that whole idea of can you teach an old dog new tricks? The answer is yes. And I am learning to be a better listener and to have better empathy. And I've got a long, long way to go.
I think we all do. We all could do a little bit better at relating and kind of and passing the empathy along. And I love that you mentioned that because I actually just did an episode not too long ago about how reading actually improves our empathy and just how critical it is to be able to connect with one another despite maybe disagreements or opposite thought processes, and just how critical that is for the workplace, especially because you have a jumble of ideas and thoughts, but being able to kind of work together to see all sides, I think is just so incredibly important, especially now.
It is. And you know, you are going to be the same person you are today, 5 years from now, and then 5 years from now, and so forth, except for two main things: the books you read and the people you hang out with.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
And you want to be a lifelong learner. And if you really want to continue to grow and develop and stay fresh, continue to read and continue to look at who are the people you're hanging out with.
Yeah, the people you're hanging out with, the people you're listening to, you are what you consume, especially with like social media, YouTube and all that. You are definitely what you put your attention to. So what's your current position and how long have you worked in that position?
Sure. So right now, my current title is, and let me take a step back here. I think it's really important to look at a person's character and a person who they are. Titles are secondary. It's really about how do you treat people. So right now, I'm the manager of learning and development for Verizon. I work for corporate Verizon. I worked for TracFone. We were acquired. Been there 6 years next week. 6 years.
Congrats.
Thanks. And we were acquired by Verizon a year and a half ago. And so I've been doing this role for a year and a half. But it's in my DNA to do learning and development. This is who I am. And so I've been in one capacity or another for literally going on, 30 years to do learning and development, to do training, mentoring, and coaching others.
And that's something that I just kind of want to dive into a lot more of. And that's something where even just when we were setting up the meeting, I was kind of going through your LinkedIn profile and seeing your posts and your reposts and things like that. And it was so much focused on how can we improve? How can we have better leaders, better examples, better mentors, even in the workforce and just in kind of the upcoming generation. So I really want to kind of dive into, where did you start? I mean, what was your first job ever? And we'll kind of map out the path to where you ended up in learning development and sticking with that for almost 30 years.
It's funny because anybody who gets into learning and development has quite a, what's the word? Circuitous? Is that the word? You get there random, many different ways on how to get there. And so my first job I ever had, I grew up right outside of Chicago, and I worked in a factory. So I'm going to show my age here. Stencils. So even before there were like fax machines, you had stencils. And so I worked for a company called American Stencil. They were the last ones here in the United States. I was right outside of Chicago, and I worked there, and I was folding boxes in a warehouse when I was 16.
16, yeah.
And
air quotes 16.
Yeah. And I was folding boxes in a warehouse, and I'll never forget it because I was there in a corner, and it was hot. I mean, in Chicago, the summers get super hot, and they had like fans, and it was dusty, and just tons of boxes. And I was in a corner, literally folding boxes for 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and I'd literally be like this, folding the boxes, like in tears, going, "Is this what I'm going to do with my life?" And I was like, wow. I was able to ride my bike there and ride my bike home at lunch. And yeah, I mean, it was quite a humbling thing, but that's where I started. And it was really about, you have to have a work ethic. And I realized I love to be around people. And there were times that people forgot I was there and I was just a kid. But that was really, that was just a summer job. Did that a couple summers. But again, it teaches a hard work ethic, and you meet a lot of just incredible people and learn to grow and develop. And that was great. But what happened here is I went to school in Honolulu, Hawaii. I went to Chaminade University, and I graduated with political science and religious studies, the two things you don't want to talk to people about, politics and religion.
The two things that people are very like one way or the other. You're never sure.
Right. Exactly. And what I focused on was conflict resolution and peace studies. And I absolutely loved it. And that helped me personally, professionally, just look at how do you talk to different people and have political savvy, look at the big picture. And that's how I roll, is I literally am just a huge big picture thinker. From there, I was an elementary school teacher with a Honolulu school district for the Catholic schools. And I was there for about 5 years. And it was pretty cool. I did 3rd and 4th grade. I was an elementary school teacher, taught all the different subjects, and coached volleyball, basketball, track and field. Loved it. It was pretty amazing. And from there, I moved from Honolulu to Boise, Idaho. I just randomly wanted to pick a place to live and try something completely different. And so I went to Boise, and I started working for Micron Technology. And so it was pretty amazing going from the elementary school district working with kids to working in a manufacturing. And I was in the assembly, working in assembly. And as I say, it's in my DNA. Even if I wanted to, even if I don't have a title of a trainer or a coach or mentor, that's what I do. So I was in the manufacturing area, and people would be like, we did all these different types of tests and clarifying things. And people are like, I don't know why we run this test. It doesn't make any sense. Why am I doing this? And so what I would do is put together basic mathematical formulas and saying, look, if we're 1 micro unit off here, this is huge. There's upstream and downstream impacts, and we need to make sure that we look at where are these and we identify it. And so I started putting together just different formulas and so forth. And so they're saying, you know what, you're much better at that side of things than this whole manufacturing. And so I moved into what was called the mathematics lab. And so I started doing electronics, chemistry, physics, and started doing that training at Micron. And from there, I moved into corporate training, going into problem solving, decision making, working at project management, communication skills, and worked my way doing that. At the same time, I started going to University of Idaho grad school in the Boise campus. And so I am a Vandal. Yes, I am.
All right. Well, I'm a Bronco. I went to Utah State. I would probably say I'm a Bronco. Now we don't even really play each other in football anymore. So it's okay. It's all right.
Love it. No, good deal. Yeah. And so during that time, that's when I started honing my skills, becoming more into adult learning theory. And it's interesting because if you look at the difference between how children learn and then you go into adult learning, so that's the difference between andragogy and pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about how children learn, you say, go ahead and do this assignment. And they don't question why. They just do the assignment, and some get frustrated, what have you. But I mean, they do the assignment. With adults, if you tell them, do this task, do this assignment, whatever it may be, they're going to say, why?
There's a little bit more challenge to it.
Yes, and you have to be able to connect the dots and where people see, how does this relate to my career and how am I going to grow? How is this going to align to our corporate strategy? And so it's different. Now working with kids is a whole other different characteristics and skill sets that you have and behaviors that you have to be aware of. That adults, you see that sometimes too, but it's a different mindset with adults. You really have to get into the why. And so from there, I went from working at Micron, working at Western States Equipment Company. I was doing corporate training. Absolutely love that. It's a large Caterpillar dealer, and that was incredible. Absolutely loved it. I worked on the soft skills side of things. We had the hard skills like the working on machinery and dozers and so forth. I didn't do any of that. I've got 10 of these thumbs. I can't turn around. I'm absolutely horrible at it. But we had technical trainers, and I'd work with them. And unfortunately, and here's a life lessons too, Colten. I got let go from, this was in the 2008, 2009 timeframe where I got let go from Western States. I got laid off. The economy was horrible. Okay. The economy was horrible, but they treated me with respect, with dignity, and treated me extremely well. And so it's one of those things that I have just amazing, mad love to say about Western States and in Caterpillar, even though they laid me off. The economy was rough. The economy was terrible, and things happen. And it's you live and learn. And so, of course, it's humbling. It's a blow to your ego. But I think I've really learned some amazing life lessons. I have some friends still working there who are I have just the utmost respect. And it's interesting. When I was a little child, my grandfather had said to me, never burn a bridge. And I remember being a little kid going, never burn a bridge. That's, what do you mean? But it really is so true that you just never know who you're going to run into, or people know each other. You don't ever want to leave a bad impression with someone or negative reaction or so forth. And you always want to make sure you have your best foot forward and be as professional as you can. And so, as I said, I learned a tremendous amount from there. And then I went into doing a little bit of consulting work. I worked with a company called GP Strategies. I worked at Eli Lilly doing pharmaceutical consulting work. I was in the neuroscience division. So between, it's just amazing because I've worked with just some brilliant minds at Micron, Western States, Blue Cross, just brilliant minds. They're just so much smarter than I am that again, life can be so humbling when you think you know something, you know it well. And then you just see some people who know all the like molecular structures and all these different things that you know absolutely nothing about. And you're like, wow. Yeah. And so I did some consulting there. And then what happened, and that was in Indianapolis, Indiana. And then I worked at Blue Cross. Luckily, there was a position open up. I moved back to Boise. And actually, that's where I met your father, and I worked with him for over 6 years and just had amazing experiences. And a couple things I want you to ask your dad about.
Okay.
Ask him about running out of gas in a car as we're doing a road trip. Okay, so I want to make sure you don't forget.
Let me jot these down really quick. All right, running out of gas, because I don't think I've heard that story.
Oh yeah, and then also having the lights turned out. We were in a thunderstorm in a hotel in Idaho Falls, and we lost all electricity, and one of our peers was stuck in an elevator. So ask him during the power outage. So ask him about those two things.
I might have to just bring you both back, and we could just all have this fun discussion. I'm all for work stories.
Oh my gosh, but what does he always say? We got to protect the names to save the
exactly.
So we got to be really
absolutely, yeah. That might be something coming up. I love gathering funny
Like,
stories from people about work and things like that, just because I think there's so many instances where work is hard and work is tough, but there you also can just kind of look back and just have a good chuckle and be like, yeah, that was a weird time, but that was fun and it was just good.
yeah, well, and that's, you bring up a really good point, Colton, is that it's really important to take your job seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. Making sure that you have fun along the way and always have a plan B. A funny story that I have, you always want to have, as I said, a plan B. When I was working for the Western States equipment dealer, I was up in the Wyoming shop. Okay. And I was in there doing a training. And they did at that time, now they have a big, beautiful facility. But at that time, what they had was just a smaller unit with a couple garages where a couple machines could come in. So it's much smaller. And they actually did the training room. The training was actually in where they worked on the machines. And so what they had to do was take the machine out, open up the door, take the dozer out, and then I was doing the training right there. I mean, so first of all, it's March, but it was actually freezing up there, and there's tons of snow in Wyoming, and it was crazy. What had happened was when the door came back and was lifting up, there was snow like got on the ceiling. Okay. And so there's snow, and I didn't recognize this, of course. And so I'm sitting down to do a communication class. I'm sitting down to do a communication. Everyone's sitting around like in a circle. And I had one of those projectors, and we're projecting. We closed the door, and then that was where it was projecting on. The screen was the door. This huge clump of snow fell and landed directly on, I mean, it was like a bullseye, landed directly on the projector and ruined it. And so, well, there goes the videos, the PowerPoints, the whole bit. It was completely destroyed. And so you always need to have a plan B. And it was one of those things where we were just sitting there like literally laughing and crying, saying, "How did that happen?" I mean,
How
that
does
is
that
literally
work? Great. So I want to kind of jump back a little bit and go back to how do you think you ended up in the learning and development? What led you to kind of stick with that and really feel passionate about kind of learning more about the industry?
So again, getting into learning and development, it's in my DNA. Even if I want to do something different, this is what I do. At Micron, that's I was in assembly in the manufacturing, and it just I started was training people and helping others. I'd see if they're struggling. I'd put together job aids. I mean, it's just what I do. And when I want to make sure that I'm putting together a training plan, a standard operating procedures, how can we improve this process, having that continuous improvement mindset. And so it really is, that's what I do. And we all have our different strengths. We all these things we do well. And that's just how I'm wired, is to help train and develop. And so, having a bachelor's in politics and religion, and then, going for the master's in adult ed, and then I've worked in all these different industries. It's really about learning and development. Those are common themes, that it's really about people and how do people work together and collaborate and share ideas, have a strategy and work towards it. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Everybody needs to have those skills about how to communicate and share and work together.
How much do you think having that kind of master's has helped you in your current position or reach the point that you are today?
So that's the thing, is that you get into a point in your career where there's the technical certifications, like for instance, like a design thinking, emotional intelligence, strength finders. You can't you can't go wrong with any of those type of certifications for your particular job in your field. You need to continue getting those. But it's also important to go out and get the higher education, like a master's, a bachelor's, sometimes even a PhD, or maybe a second bachelor's or second master's, where you're able to see benchmark best practices, and you're able to work at common people in your field, and you're able to take a step aside and see what's happening in the industry, and then other industries that have the periphery, on the periphery, where you can see how does this relate to us. Because a lot of times in the corporate world, you have blinders. And not only do you have blinders just for your organization, but you have blinders for your own specific department, your specific area. And you can have this great localized knowledge, but you're missing a tremendous amount of opportunities about what's happening in Asia, what's happening in Europe, what are some trending things that are going on in South America, what are different prototypes that organizations are putting together. And so when you get that higher ed, again, whether it's associate, master's, bachelor's, doctor, whatever it may be, you get to you're in that space and you're in that environment where you're continually learning. And I can't say it enough that is just so important to be able to see
So
that.
having that kind of a degree really gave you kind of insights to what other people are doing and kind of helped you branch out to where you kind of remove those blinders. You kind of get out and see how other people are handling these various problems and their solutions, and you can kind of glean from them, right?
Absolutely. And again, that's the thing, is that it's so important to see, whatever problem, opportunity, situation, however we want to label it, your organization may be going through. Other people have gone through this similar, may not be the exact same thing, but something similar in another industry at another time. They might be going through it also. And so you really want to look, and I like how you said that, glean from their experiences and say, how can we work on this together? And how can I see what are those nuggets of information that relate to
Well,
us?
that's something that I kind of took from The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clayson. I don't know if you'd read that.
Oh, I've heard of
Yeah.
that. I haven't.
Well,
I have
he
not.
talks about the seeing the world as a series of problems to be solved. But I basically I came to that kind of same conclusion where there may be you may be having an experience that no one has ever had before, but there's been so many people who've had an experience that's very similar that we can kind of help from, and that we can gain insight from, and so that we can all move forward together. Because I think a lot of the times, especially now, it's kind of like I don't know, and I don't have kids of my own, but I remember growing up and going, well, no one understands me. And I think you hear that a lot from popular celebrities and even things like that, where it's like, well, no one understands me. It's like, well, that may be the case. No one perfectly understands you, but there's a lot of people who have been in similar situations that we can still help from, and we can still get advice and learn from, and being able to kind of get outside of our community a little bit to kind of learn from each other and really help us all move forward and become better.
You're spot on. And to that point, I believe it was Aristotle who said, the kids today, I don't know what they're reading. I can't stand the music they're listening to, and look at the clothes that they're wearing. That was
Yeah.
Aristotle. That's
So even back then, yeah.
3,000 years ago. So again, that's the thing, is anything that we think that we're going through today, there's similar situations that we can glean nuggets. I love that. And I'll have to check that book out.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it as a kind of a self-help book, as well as kind of a career, and then also just financially, just as someone who's 25 figuring out life and figuring out what their career path is going to look like. It helped me a lot, so I highly recommend it. And I want to ask you, what kind of mentors or books have you read that have really made an impact on you?
Sure. So a couple things here. Mentoring, I think, is just huge. I think we should always have three different types of mentoring at all times. We should always have a mentor. Doesn't matter where you are in your career, you should always have somebody along the way who's mentoring you. Your father, he was an amazing mentor for me, and you learn from them. You hear their insights and so forth, and they may have a little different experience. They have seen something and they mentor you. And it's pretty cool is that a lot of times, if that mentor, you get that relationship many times where if you hit it off and things are great, where you can all of a sudden become like a side by side teammate, where you're all of a sudden buddies together and you're able to give and receive feedback. So you're like a side by side mentor. And then, and I have tons of those. My brothers, they will give me feedback, tell me when I'm doing things, but they'll also say, hey, do you know this is how you're coming across? My sister is like that. So family members, and I'm very fortunate that I've had friends that'll say that. And then also the third type of mentor should be, you should always be mentoring someone else. Someone should be mentoring you. You should have a side by side, and then you should be mentoring somebody also, sharing your knowledge, passing on that wisdom, learning from somebody. And who knows, maybe sometime they can be mentoring you and you can have that side by side. And right now it's funny because I'll have people reach out to me quite often online and say, hey, I want to get into the learning and development field. Can you tell me about this? And I'm actually mentoring somebody from Argentina right now.
Wow.
There's a little bit of a language difficulty, but it's okay. He just reached out to me and says, I want to get in the learning and development field. I've seen some of your posts on LinkedIn. Would you mind meeting up with me? So at first I thought it was a bit of a scam, but actually we've had video conferencing, and I give him assignments, and we've been meeting the last 3 weeks, and it's actually been pretty awesome. And I can see us being friends for a while. And he's literally just graduated university in Argentina, and it's a pretty cool relationship. And so we should always have that, as I said, and always have some being mentored, have a side by side mentor, and then you're mentoring someone else. And I've had tons of people who've been very great for me. In terms of books, right now this is a book I'm reading. It's a mammoth of a book.
Holy cow.
What it's called, is Top Grading, and it is Top Grading by Dr. Bradford Smart. He's written several different books, and then this leads into something called upskilling, and that's what I'm also looking at also. And what this focuses on is top talent. It's funny because I always felt this way, that organizations are like systems, that we all work together, and one department impacts another. Just like, one part of your body, if all of a sudden your big toe hurts, like if you've ever had a big toe injury, it impacts your entire life. If you ever had a back injury, like playing golf with your father, you have a back injury, it's going to impact your whole, how you sleep and how you eat, how you exercise and everything. And so I've always believed that with ourselves, and then with our businesses are the same way, is that if something is impacting or something is hurting, it impacts the rest of the organizations. And that's the systems based thinking. And so it starts with making sure you have employees who are empowered and engaged. And how do we make sure we upskill them? And that's what's called top skilling, where you focus on your top talent and really take them to that next level and really focus on that 1%. And I love that. So that's what I'm currently reading right now. But Crucial Conversations, ADKAR, The Oz Principle, I could go on and on. That books are incredible. And believe it or not, this might sound silly or what have you, but the Bible is actually a great book of business also. The Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, whatever you're going to read, there's all these different stories that are relationships about how do we work with people, how do I see myself, how do I communicate with others, how do I learn from our elders, and how to treat people. And so those are books that, it's okay to talk about spiritual things in the workplace, as long as you're able to listen to somebody else's perspective also.
Well, and I think even just with that, I think business and even finances to some degree is so much more behavioral than kind of the analytical. I mean, a lot of it is just kind of the mastering of self, or having that kind of self-control to know what you need to do, what needs to be focused on. And a lot of it is behavioral. You can learn skills and workplace and what they need from you, but I mean, changing your behavior takes a long time, and it is difficult, but it's so much more rewarding. So I would agree, kind of those scriptural, the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Quran, the Torah, a lot of those are just kind of
Absolutely.
that self-improvement, self-mastery, so that you can really push yourself to new heights.
Absolutely. See, 100% with you on that. Yes.
Perfect. So tell me a little bit more about kind of what you do on a daily basis. Like as a learning and development manager, what do you kind of do on a day-to-day? What's your main focus?
So my main focus on a day-to-day basis is really about people. And I can work with senior executives, and then all of a sudden work with entry level and everybody in between. It's really about working with people and making sure that they have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do their job and be able to collaborate. Again, when you're working with leaders, it's also, there's the strategy side. But a lot of times it's about the interactions and how do they work with others, how do they coach others, and how do they communicate and share, give feedback, receive feedback from others. And so it's that side. And then when you're working with people, who are brand new, with employees who are brand new to an organization, it's about making sure they're able to navigate things. Something as simple as, how do I, right now, what's the difference between Microsoft and Google? Being able to navigate that, and where are my resources, and just some basic things where people feel empowered and able to do their job and know the resources and whom to turn to when they have questions.
Well, good, because I think a lot of that kind of goes back to where you're talking about systems. And I don't remember where I read it, but it was basically an organization in a time of crises falls back to their systems, whether they have systems in place or not. And so if you don't have a system in place, nothing happens, and that's the system. So how would you go about kind of addressing maybe a systematic problem? Is it SOPs? What do you do to kind of help correct what the systems look like in an organization?
So when you analyze a situation, you want to be able to do a needs assessment, and I think that's where we're doing your empathy work, and you're going out there and saying what's happening here and understand the situation. And from a Stephen Covey perspective, begin with the end in mind. What are we trying to accomplish? And so a lot of times it's even just corralling everybody right up front. What is it we're trying to achieve? Are we trying to increase customer satisfaction, decrease downturn, increase employee loyalty, whatever it may be, but making sure right up front, what is it we're trying to accomplish? Because a lot of times you get people saying, we're going to work on this. And a lot of times we have a bias towards action as opposed to a bias towards result. And there's times where you just need to take a step back and say, what is it we're trying to accomplish? Begin with the end in mind, and then do some empathy work and understand what are your pain points, what's prohibiting us from getting to that situation, and what are some pathways that we can go. And this is where I think it's important for organizations, and you're seeing more and more of this, it's having that rapid prototyping mindset where you're going to try something. Let's give it a shot and let's see what happens. And so it's called a low resolution option. And so you go out there and say, let's give it a shot and see what happens here and see what works. And throw the spaghetti off the wall and see if it sticks. And here's the thing is if it works, great. Why did it work? So let's build upon it. If it doesn't work, great. Why doesn't it work? What do we need to do to make it work? And so it's having that open dialogue and discussion and being willing to take a risk and try those opportunities of, as I said, rapid prototyping and continue to build
Well,
upon
and I
it.
really liked what you said with that kind of bias towards action instead of results, because I think a lot of the time that is kind of the, hey, we need something and we need it done now, but we're not even sure of what that is. So instead, we just kind of end up having to course correct a lot more than if maybe we just started with thinking, okay, what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to have happen? And then how do we get there instead of, and I think there are some times where you can go, okay, we just need to kind of get a move on and we can kind of course correct. But I think we can save a lot of time if we, like you said, begin with the end in mind and kind of know what we're trying to resolve.
And take a step further. What Stephen Covey says is sometimes we need to take a step back and sharpen the saw. And I think organizations, we get so tired, are so, hey, we got to keep doing this. We got to keep, working. I don't have time to sharpen that saw. Well, if we take a step back and say, what is it we're trying to achieve and how do we make sure we have the right tools, and it's just taking that collective pause for a moment and say, what is it we're trying to achieve? And that's hard. And that's getting the leaders to buy into that and saying, this in the long run is going to be so much more important. And I want to build on what you're saying earlier, Colten, when you're saying that things will happen, the systems will fall back. And if you don't have a system, and it's the same idea with culture. Culture, every place has a culture. We all have the same exposure to the project management, to technologies. People have the same degrees and so forth. But what changes one organization from another, it's the people and being very deliberate with what type of culture will we have. And because again, culture will have every organization, every team, every community, whatever it may be, has a culture, whether we realize it or not. And so it's being very deliberate and saying, what are the behaviors that we do want to see? And how do we reward those right type of behaviors? And if we don't reward those right type of behaviors, what type of culture are we fostering? And so that's where it comes back to that. When we look at this and we start problem solving, saying, what is the culture we want to have? Is it that urgency? Look busy, just do something. Or is it, do we want to be very deliberate, strategic, and do the right type of things?
Yeah. And I would agree with that. And just figuring out what kind of culture you want to have in your workplace and working towards that, no matter where you are kind of, maybe in management, or even if you're just kind of the entry level position, you play a critical part in developing that culture, in developing what the system is going to look like. Just kind of finishing off a little bit, when you and I were setting up our meeting, I kind of dove into your LinkedIn profile because that was the best way for me to kind of poke around, start getting questions. And this is the part that I really loved. And I wrote it down in the questions that I sent you. It's, you have on your LinkedIn subject line or about where it's developing leaders and being eternally optimistic. And I just want to dive into that a little bit more about why is it so important to be optimistic?
It's key to be optimistic because things will work out. They will work out. And again, being deliberate, how do we want to have them work out? The glass is half full. We are the ones that we can make it happen. I believe, these are words from your father, actually. People are bright, intelligent, and articulate, and will figure things out. And we can get these things done. And I've realized too that have you ever taken Strengths Finders before? Are you familiar with
Yes,
that?
I'm familiar with that. I think my dad was giving me a book to do a strengths finder test, and that was something I looked into. Yes.
Okay, good. It's it's life changing. So optimistic and positivity are my number one, and I've always been that way, where I've always been overly positive. And so I have to be careful with that too, because there's a time and a place for that, to make sure that you're positive, because sometimes people need a moment to just say, oh, this is not working, and have those frustrations. But things will work out. And so when I say be eternally optimistic, it's really saying think long term, because too often when we're talking about an organization, we think about what are the profits for the next quarter, instead of thinking about long term, what are we looking at for the next quarter century. And so it's being in that infinite game and looking long term and thinking about how are we going to continue to improve our employee satisfaction, how are we going to leave the earth a better place than where we are today, and how do we make sure that people are coming to work and really saying I'm a better person by being part of this culture, this team, and this organization. And so having that optimistic mindset will really help bring different ideas, innovation, and people feel free to share ideas, concerns, and have innovative thoughts, and you'll have a better
Yeah,
workplace.
and I would agree with that so much, because I think a lot of the time, even with just what we consume as individuals with social media, Amazon, a lot of these kind of get it quick, get it now, and then it's just kind of these little small wins that don't really amount to anything. But when you're playing for the longer game, for that longer kind of satisfaction, there's so much more growth that can happen. There's so much more that can be achieved. I think it was Bill Gates who said we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in a decade. And just being able to see that kind of long term, what we can really achieve here in 10 years, as opposed to here this next week or this next month or next year. There's so much more than we can do that we think we can.
Love it. Love it. Love it. And again, so I don't know if you've read The Infinite Game by
I
Simon
have not.
Sinek. Oh,
It's
phenomenal.
going on my
Right
list
up
right
your
now.
alley.
Let me.
Anything from Simon Sinek, anything from Brene Brown. Yeah, you
Perfect.
can't go wrong with
Yeah,
those.
I love a lot of the books. It's something I've been trying to get better at, because for a lot of the time it was just watching YouTube and I just felt so stuck. And just getting back into reading and getting back into kind of other people's thoughts has just helped me expand myself so much more. It's made me want to start this podcast. It's made me want to jump in and try to help people in any way that I can, to see what people's career paths look like. And so I really do love it and enjoy it a lot.
Well, I can see that you're really making a positive impact, and I think this is pretty awesome, brother.
Thanks.
Very cool.
I really appreciate it. And I look forward to kind of going back and forth with you a lot, because I think you are someone who I can really learn from. Like you said, when I kind of started the idea for this podcast, I realized that I didn't have a whole lot of mentors in my life. I had my dad, I had a lot of my family, but other than that, I had been kind of closed off. I mean, even when I was going to college, I didn't really make an effort to make a relationship with any of my professors, any of my teachers. And I'm really kicking myself for that. And so just being
Well,
able to build these relationships and build kind of a network of people that you can bounce ideas back that from different backgrounds, and just seeing, hey, this is what's possible, this is what's out there, and figuring out what you want, I think has just been so pivotal for me and so important to me. So is there anything else that you'd like to share that you feel is just important for the upcoming workforce?
sure. For the upcoming workforce, follow your passions. And if you like, so for instance, my oldest daughter loves goats. Okay, we have three goats at our house, and my sister-in-law has a kosher goat cheese farm. And if this is what she wants to take over, follow your passion. She loves goats. She loves dirt, things that, literally dirt, like dirt and flowers. and follow your passion. If that's what you like, go out there and learn it. People need to know about this. And, there's going to be a job out there. My other daughter, she loves skateboarding. They're very different. It's amazing. And it's follow your passion, and you never know where it's going to take you. And so you might say, I like to draw art. I like hockey, whatever it may be. I like canoeing. Whatever your passion is, follow it. Really just dive deep into it, learn about it. And you want to make sure that you're happy doing what you're doing, and follow those passions. I can't say that enough, that, let your true authentic self come out. Don't try and be something else to somebody else. Be who you are, because eventually who you are will come out. And be in the environment that allow you to express yourself, and be willing to take those risks to say, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to be humble, I'm going to be my genuine person to make sure that I'm able to do this. And it starts with following your passions, because it's something that you believe in from the heart.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I know it was one of my favorites, just to be able to get to know Tim a little bit better, as well as getting to know more about the learning and development field, how important training is, developing the right culture, and making sure that we're able to communicate with one another. So if you like this, make sure to leave a 5-star review. Let me know your feedback. Follow me on social media, and have a great rest of your week.